Well, today we arrive at a major high point in the unfolding drama that we've been looking at in this book of Esther. Now, as we continue through our series entitled For Such a Time as This, we're going to focus on the subject of poetic justice today. Our text comes from Esther chapter 6, verses 10 through 14. Listen closely as I read the text. The king told Haman, "Hurry and do just as you proposed. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you have suggested." So Haman took the garment and the horse. He clothed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square, crying out before him, "This is what is done for the man the king wants to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman, overwhelmed, hurried off for home with his head covered. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai is Jewish and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him because your downfall is certain." While they were speaking with him, the eunuchs of the king arrived and rushed Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. Now, today we're considering this idea of poetic justice. What is poetic justice? What is it we're talking about? Well, poetic justice is what is served when good characters are finally rewarded and bad characters are finally punished, usually through some ironic twist of fate. Now, as we arrive at this high point today, we find ourselves approaching the end of the book. And in the text, we clearly see poetic justice being carried out in the lives of Esther, Mordecai, and Haman. Now, today's passage begins in verse 10, and here the king commands Haman to hurry and do just as you proposed. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you have suggested. Can you imagine Haman's state of shock at this turn of events? While he had considered himself to be the one to receive all this great glory, he had been relegated to carry out this act for his archenemy, Mordecai. Now, I would imagine that when the king made this command to him, Haman's jaw probably bounced off of the floor. But he had no choice but to obey. And what a crushing blow. Mordecai was destined to receive the honor that Haman had longed to receive for himself. In addition to clothing Mordecai in the royal robes and seating him upon the royal horse, Haman was also forced to lead the horse with Mordecai upon its back through the city streets, declaring out loud for all to hear, "This is what is done for the man the king wants to honor." No doubt the citizens of the city had already seen Haman's giant gallows he had constructed. They were also probably pretty much well aware of the animosity that Haman felt towards Mordecai. And yet, here he is leading him through the streets in all this great regalia, crying out loud, "This is the honor received." Thus we see the attempt by Haman to get back home as quickly as possible with his head covered and enshrouded in humiliation and grief immediately after he had carried out the king's command. When Haman's wife and friends learned that Mordecai was a Jew, they predicted Haman's utter ruin. Imagine, if you will, how destructive pride had become in Haman's life. Here was a man that achieved great wealth, great popularity, great position, and great notoriety throughout the empire. Yet, all of these things weren't enough. His concern with one man's lack of respect was about to bring about his utter destruction. But let me assure you, the story isn't over yet. Poetic justice at its most complete was yet to come. You know, we don't always get to see poetic justice or even the end of the story in our own lives. Today, I encourage you to think about unresolved situations that you may be facing. Release any resolution you desire into God's hands. Let him handle it in his way. He alone can deliver true justice. Just let it go. It's not worth it. Let it go. And find peace in knowing that God is ultimately in absolute control of all things. And his will ultimately prevails in all situations. Until next time.